Ever walk into like a dark room and you could swear you just saw a flash of light?
Hmm.
Or how about this? You ever catch something out the corner of your eye? Like a little worm doing the backstroke?
Yeah.
Those weird little visual things, those quirks, that's photopsia.
Yeah.
And a bunch of you have been asking us about this, wanting to learn more about photopsia, so we're going to deep dive into it.
Right. I think what's really interesting about this is that photopsia in itself isn't a disease.
Hmm.
It's not like a condition in itself.
Oh, okay.
It's a symptom.
Okay.
It's a symptom that something else is going on.
Like a visual SOS from your eye.
Exactly.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So we're talking about like the flashes and those floaters, the things that like
Uh-huh.
zigzag in your vision.
Yeah. I mean, you're hitting all the right notes. Um, Photopsia, it can look like a lot of different things to different people. Some people might describe it as like seeing flickering lights,
Right.
almost like a camera flash going off in their eye.
Oh, okay.
Other people might see those classic floaters, those little squiggles or specks that kind of drift across their field of vision.
Right.
And then you have some people who experience almost like a visual snow.
Yeah.
So that would be like a subtle static throughout their entire visual field.
Okay, so I'm picturing like a rave, like inside someone's eye almost.
Right.
And now, like, my floaters that I get occasionally
Right.
seem pretty tame.
Right.
But how, I mean, seriously, how can all these things be, like, grouped under the same umbrella?
Well, I think what it comes down to is understanding how our vision actually works in the first place.
Okay.
So if we think about our eye as a camera, the retina, which is the back of the eye, would be like the camera's sensor.
Okay.
So light enters the eye, it hits that sensor, and then from the retina, those signals are then sent to the brain via the optic nerve.
Okay.
So photopsia is essentially what happens when something disrupts that pathway.
So it's like if you're watching TV and the cable's loose.
Exactly.
And you're getting static.
Yeah,
It's a bad connection.
exactly. And it can be as simple as pressure. Think about when you rub your eyes really hard
Mm-hmm.
and you see stars.
Mm.
That's your brain kind of misinterpreting signals due to that pressure. But it can also be triggered by more complex things like,
Yeah.
changes in the fluid inside your eye, or even like neurological blips.
Okay, that makes sense. So now I got to know, what are some of the things that actually cause this? And should we be worried about them?
That's a really good question. And I think, that's why we're all here, right? Like, what's causing it? Should I be worried?
Right.
And I think knowing the cause is really the first step in kind of understanding when to be concerned. So let's start with some of the common culprits, the ones that are usually more annoying than alarming. A simple one like eye rubbing.
Yeah.
We're all guilty of it.
Oh, totally.
But that pressure on your eyeballs can actually trigger those flashing lights.
Wait, so when I rub my eyes and I see stars, that's part of this.
It is, yeah. It's way more common than you think.
Yeah.
And speaking of kind of just like everyday occurrences, have you ever like noticed after you sneeze you might see a flash of light?
You know what I think I have? Yeah, just like a quick burst.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all kind of connected to that sudden, temporary pressure change in your head, which kind of brings me to another common and usually harmless cause, which is something called posterior vitreous detachment, or PVD.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, the inside of your eye is filled with this gel-like substance. It's called the vitreous humor.
Okay.
As we age, that gel can actually shrink and kind of pull away from the retina, that camera sensor we were talking about.
So the vitreous is sort of peeling away from the retina.
Yeah. And
That sounds a little freaky.
it does. It does. And it's most of the time it's a normal part of aging. It doesn't cause any lasting problems. And in fact, it's actually that detachment itself that can cause those floaters and flashes, because as the gel pulls away, it tugs on the retina a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's always best to err on the side of caution. And if you're experiencing like any sudden changes in your vision, get it checked out
Yeah.
by an eye doctor.
Better safe than sorry.
Exactly.
Especially when it comes to your eyes.
Exactly.
But I feel like we're about to go from harmless and normal to like see your eye doctor immediately territory.
You are correct. So while most of the time photopsia is nothing to be overly concerned about, it can be a warning sign of more serious conditions, like a retinal tear or detachment.
Okay, yeah, retinal detachment definitely sounds a lot scarier than a little eye rubbing. So what exactly are we talking about here?
So imagine this, the retina, that delicate lining at the back of your eye that we've been calling the camera sensor, it actually tears or pulls away from its normal position.
Oh, wow.
That's a retinal detachment. It's a serious condition, and it requires immediate medical attention.
And photopsia is a warning sign of that.
It can be. So people with retinal tears or detachments, they often experience like a sudden increase in floaters or flashes, and
Mm.
sometimes they even describe it as like a curtain being drawn across their vision.
A curtain? Yeah, no thanks. I'm good. I'm gonna go to the doctor if that happens. What are some other kind of red flag causes we should look out for? So retinal tears and detachments, those are definitely going on the list of makes me want to run to the eye doctor immediately. But I'm curious about some other eye conditions. Like, is photopsia always a sign that something that serious is going on?
Not at all. I mean, we talked about some of the more common things, but there are, other conditions where photopsia is a factor, and,
Yeah.
and they might surprise you a little bit. Like take age-related macular degeneration or AMD. It's more common as we get older. And basically what it does is it affects the central part of your vision.
Central part, so like right in the middle of what you're looking at.
Exactly. Imagine you're looking at something and the center of your vision is blurry, almost like there's a smudge on a camera lens.
Why?
That's what AMD can do.
Hmm.
And photopsia, especially those, wavy lines or distorted images, that could be an early warning sign.
So with AMD, it's not necessarily like that flash. It's more that your vision itself is distorted.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's not, always flashing lights or floaters. Sometimes it's about like how you perceive shapes and images. And while AMD is a serious condition, the good news is that, catching it early can make a huge difference in preserving your vision.
So early detection is key. But we've been talking a lot about like the eyeball itself, but you mentioned some more surprising causes before, right? Like things that aren't necessarily about our eyeballs.
Right. And that kind of goes back to, the connection between our eyes and our brains. Sometimes photopsia can actually be a symptom of a neurological event, like an ocular migraine.
So those like weird shimmery lines that people say with migraines, that can be photopsia.
It's all connected.
I always thought those were just like a migraine thing.
Well, migraines, most people think of like a really intense headache,
Right.
but they can also trigger these visual disturbances, whether it's, those shimmery lines or even temporary blind spots or flashes of light. It's just another example of how, complex our bodies are and how it's all interconnected.
Yeah, this is blowing my mind. So what about those situations where like there's nothing actually wrong, but someone's still getting photopsia?
Yeah, it can happen. And that's where things get really interesting. There's a phenomenon called Charles Bonnet syndrome, and it primarily affects people who already have significant vision loss.
Okay, so Charles Bonnet syndrome, you're saying people who already have trouble seeing are experiencing photopsia, even hallucinations.
It's a fascinating phenomenon. But essentially what's happening is when the brain is no longer receiving consistent visual information from the eyes, it kind of starts to compensate.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does that in some really, really unexpected ways. So it starts creating these vivid, almost hallucinatory images to kind of fill in the gaps.
So it's like the brain is saying, hey, I'm bored, I don't have any input, I'm going to create a light show.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It just goes to show
Yeah.
like how adaptable and how complex our brains are. But, the main takeaway here is whether photopsia is caused by something as, common as eye rubbing or as unique as Charles Bonnet syndrome, you know, the most important thing is to, be aware of any changes in your vision and talk to your doctor.
Yeah, be aware and talk to your doctor. Love that. Okay, so we've covered the what, the why, even the wait, really. But before we let you go, any last words of wisdom for our listeners, especially those who, might be dealing with some photopsia?
Absolutely. I think, first and foremost, listen to your body. If you experience any sudden or persistent changes in your vision, especially if they're accompanied by pain, headaches, other unusual symptoms, get to an eye doctor as soon as possible. Don't wait. Early detection and treatment can make a world of difference.
No messing around with your vision. It's too precious.
Exactly. Beyond that, do proactive. Get regular eye exams. Be mindful of your overall health. And don't hesitate to ask your doctor any questions you have about what you're experiencing.
Knowledge is power, I always say. And speaking of knowledge, I was reading something really interesting, and that's, sometimes recognizing photopsia as a side effect of a medication can actually be life-saving.
Right. There was actually a case where a patient was taking digitalis, which is a heart medication, but they were experiencing vision changes, including flashes of light. They knew that photopsia could be a sign of digitalis toxicity, so they contacted their doctor immediately, and it turns out they were right. And because they recognized that seemingly insignificant symptom, they were able to get the treatment they needed before it became life-threatening.
It really is amazing, like just seeing a flash of light can be so significant.
It can be. Our bodies are constantly sending us signals. And sometimes those signals come in the form of, flashing lights or floaters or even visual snow. It's up to us to pay attention and kind of decipher the message.
Yeah. It's funny, we kind of just go through our day, we take our vision for granted. But, when you think about all the complex things that are happening every time we open our eyes, it's pretty amazing that it works as well as it does most of the time.
It really is.
So the next time you see a flash of light, don't just brush it off. Pay attention, tune in. And as always, knowledge is power when it comes to our health.